She came to the town early in the morning when the sky was still pale and the air felt cool on her face. She did not come with a plan or a list of places to see. She only came because staying at home had become too heavy for her heart, the house. She lived and held too many memories and too much silence, so she drove until the road felt unfamiliar, and the land around her opened into wide fields and low hills. She was a widow, though most people would not guess it just by looking at her. She did not cry in public, and she did not dress in black. She carried her pain quietly, the way some people carry a secret. She had learned how to smile when needed and how to speak politely without letting her voice shake, but inside her chest there was a constant ache, like a weight that never lifted. This town was one she and her husband once talked about late at night. They imagined living somewhere calm with open land and slow days. He used to say that a place like this would help them grow. Old in peace, she never told anyone that this trip was connected to those talks. She told others she just needed a break, but deep down she wanted to see the place that had lived only in their words. She parked her car near a small diner on the side of the road. The building looked old but cared for. Paint was faded yet clean, and the windows reflected the soft morning light. She sat in the car for a moment with her hands on the steering wheel, listening to the quiet. She could hear the wind moving through grass somewhere nearby. It felt different from the silence at home. This silence did not press on her chest. It felt open and gentle. When she stepped inside the diner, a small bell above the door moved and made a light sound. The place was almost empty. Only a few people sat far apart. Some were older locals drinking coffee. Others looked like travelers passing through. No one paid much attention to her, and she was thankful for that. She chose a seat by the window and placed her bag on the chair across from her. The empty chair caught her eye right away. She noticed it the moment she sat down. She told herself it was just a chair, but her heart reacted before her mind could calm it. That chair used to belong to someone. In every part of her life, meals, conversations, long drives, quiet mornings, all of it once included another person. Now there were moments like this where the space across from her felt louder than any noise. A server came over and spoke kindly, asking what she would like to drink. The widow answered softly and ordered coffee. Her voice sounded normal to others, but she felt how careful she was being with each word. She did not want to open anything inside herself. She only wanted to sit and breathe and feel like a person again, not just someone defined by laws. As she waited, she looked outside the window. A long fence stretched across the land beyond the diner. Few horses stood far away, moving slowly. She watched them for a long time. The simple movement of their heads and tails held her attention. It reminded her that life continued even when she felt stuck in one place. Her thoughts drifted back to the last quiet morning she shared with her husband. It was not a dramatic memory. It was simple. He was reading something on his phone, and she was making coffee. Neither of them spoke much. They did not know that morning would stay with her forever. If she had known, she would have looked at him longer or held his hand a bit more. The coffee arrived, and she wrapped her hands around the warm cup. The heat felt good against her skin. It grounded her in the present. She took a slow sip and let herself stay still. She did not check her phone. She did not rush. She allowed herself to exist. Without purpose. For a while, people came and went. In the diner, doors opened and closed. Boots crossed. The floor chairs moved softly. No one bothered her, and no one asked questions. She blended into the background, and that was exactly what she wanted. For the first time in weeks, she did not feel the need to explain herself to anyone. She noticed how tired she felt, not just in her body but in her spirit. Grief did that to her. It drained even simple moments of energy. She had learned to pace herself, to rest when she could, to find small pockets of calm like this one. She knew these moments did not fix anything, but they helped her survive. The widow reached into her bag and touched the ring she still carried with her. She no longer wore it on her finger because it reminded her too strongly of what she lost, but she could not leave it behind either. Keeping it close felt like a quiet promise that she would not forget the life they built together outside. The wind picked up slightly, and clouds moved across the sky. She watched their slow change and felt time moving in a gentle way, not rushing her, not demanding anything. She realized that this was the first time in a long while she felt truly present. She was not stuck in the past or afraid of the future. She was simply here. She did not know it yet, but this quiet moment was about to shift in a way she never expected. At that time, she believed this stop was just a pause on her journey, a place to rest before moving on. She had no idea that something simple and human was waiting just beyond her awareness for. Now she sat alone with her coffee and her thoughts breathing in the calm of the morning. Holding on to the silence that felt kind rather than cruel, she was still grieving. Still carrying loss, but in that moment she felt something close to peace, even if it was small and fragile. That was how her day began, in that quiet diner on a long open road. A widow sitting with her memories, unaware that this ordinary morning would soon become unforgettable. He was working on the ranch just outside town when he noticed her first. She was moving slowly through the small diner as if she did not want to be seen. He had learned to notice people who carried quiet sadness in their eyes. He was a cowboy, not the type to ask questions unless necessary, but he had an instinct for seeing pain without words. The ranch was his life. The animals, the wide land, and the rhythm of work kept him steady. He did not speak much and preferred actions over conversation. He had his own losses in the past that he had not shared with anyone. The grief he carried was heavy. But he had learned to work with it, not against it. He knew the power of simply being present without forcing anyone to talk. When he saw her sitting by the window, he paused in his work. He did not approach her, he simply observed. She was alone, her posture relaxed, but with a tension that told him she was carrying more than just a quiet morning. She seemed almost afraid of intrusion, yet craving a connection that she would not ask for. He finished his chores and walked toward town, not with a plan, but with a simple curiosity. He bought coffee at the diner without thinking. He noticed her again the way a person notices the pattern of sunlight on a fence or the movement of a horse in the field. He did not make a comment. He did not stare. He respected the quiet space she had claimed. Sitting at the counter, he watched as she took slow sips of her coffee. Her hands were gentle on the cup. She seemed lost in thought, not looking at anything in particular. The cowboy understood that feeling. He knew the weight of memories that arrived uninvited. He knew the longing for presence without words he wanted to speak. But he also knew that words could sometimes break the fragile peace people carried in the morning. He decided instead to do small things that meant holding the door open when she left to stretch her legs and nodding in greeting when she passed. He noticed her glance briefly at him and then away, and he felt no disappointment. He was content just knowing she existed in that space. Alongside him, the diner filled slowly with the morning crowd. Some people laughed and spoke loudly, but she did not move. She remained in her seat, her eyes tracing the clouds outside. He could see the line of tension in her shoulders relax slightly when a breeze moved through the open door. He knew then that silence could heal, even if only for a short while. He went outside to check on a delivery and noticed her watching the horses from the window. Her gaze followed the animals like she was trying to understand something unspoken in their movements. He imagined her heart remembering a past that only she knew. He respected it. He did not want to intrude, but something inside emerged him to stay close without being present. Back inside the diner, she glanced at the counter and saw him sitting with his coffee. She smiled briefly, not a wide smile, but a small gesture that told him she felt a presence she did not have to explain. She had not asked for company, and he had not forced it. The exchange was quiet, but meaningfully. Remembered mornings long ago when he had lost someone he loved and no one spoke about it, and he had felt completely invisible. He realized that sometimes the kindest thing was simply to notice someone and give them space to be without intrusion. His presence was silent, yet tangible. As the hours passed, she slowly moved her things to leave. She hesitated by the door and looked back. He nodded slightly as if to say that it was okay to go. She felt a small sense of comfort from that gesture. She did not know him yet, but the fact that someone could see her without demanding anything made her feel lighter. The cowboy went about his day, returning to the ranch, but he could not shake the image of her quiet presence in the diner. He thought about her in small moments, the way one thinks of a bird flying through the open sky. He did not feel the need to contact her. He only carried the memory with respect and care. Later, when he returned to town, he saw her again, walking slowly along the edge of the street. She paused at the fence and looked out over the land. He stopped to adjust a gate and watched her from a distance. She did not acknowledge him, but she did not move away either. He understood that trust sometimes begins in silence, not in conversation. He felt a connection not through words or familiarity, but through understanding the understanding. That grief and presence could exist side by side. The knowledge that someone could sit quietly and feel human again without explanation. He realized that sometimes the greatest impact is made by being there without forcing a story that afternoon. The diner emptied and she remained seated. She looked at the window, tracing the clouds. The cowboy stayed nearby outside, attending to small chores. He was aware of her presence as one might be aware of a bird on a branch or the rustle of leaves. In the wind, he knew that noticing her without demand could be enough for now. He returned home in the evening carrying the quiet memory of her stillness. She had reminded him of his own need for gentle connection. He felt a small hope in the simplicity of the encounter, a hope that sometimes life offered small, spoken moments of understanding without explanation. He did not know what the next day would bring. He did not plan to intervene further, yet he felt the pull to remain aware of her existence. Nearby, he understood that real kindness is often patient and unassuming, and he intended to offer that in whatever small ways were possible. The cowboy never approached her directly with questions or advice. He simply existed in the same world as her, quietly offering space for her to be. He understood the power of witnessing someone without forcing their story. He trusted that the right moment would arrive naturally, and he was content to wait with patience and respect. By evening, she had left the diner and returned to her temporary lodging. He watched from a distance, not intruding, and felt a sense of quiet satisfaction in being present without expectation. He knew that sometimes the simplest actions leave the deepest impact. The awareness of another soul quietly carrying weight could itself be an offering. That night he reflected on the encounter. The images of her sitting alone, drinking coffee and watching the clouds stayed with him. He realized that small acts of presence could be as meaningful as words or grand gestures. He felt grateful for the quiet connection that required nothing yet gave something profound to both of them. In the days that followed, he continued his routine on the ranch, yet always noticed if she appeared in town or at the diner. He never approached unless necessary. He understood that her journey was hers, and he was merely a witness, offering the possibility of understanding without interruption. The bond that began in silence had started to form quietly yet deeply in ways neither of them fully understood. The next morning she returned to the diner again. The morning felt softer than the day before, and the air carried a quiet stillness that invited reflection. She took her usual seat by the window and placed her bag on the chair across from her. She did not notice him at first. He was there outside helping with small chores around the fence. She glanced occasionally at the land beyond the diner, watching the wind ripple through the grass. He noticed her immediately and paused in his work. He did not move closer. He did not want to disturb her. The cowboy understood that she needed this space to be herself, and to process her thoughts. He leaned against the gate, watching from a distance, respecting her presence while remaining available if she needed support. After a while, a sudden summer storm arrived. The clouds moved quickly, and the wind picked up. She stood and hesitated, unsure whether to leave or stay inside. The cowboy was nearby and motioned for her to remain. The diner would not accommodate everyone safely with the storm arriving. He nodded and smiled gently in a way that told her it was safe to stay, and she could trust the moment. They ended up sitting at the same table without words at first. The storm outside created a soft rhythm of rain against the roof and windows. Their silence was not awkward. It was shared. They both understood that sometimes presence mattered more than speech. She felt a small relief in not having to explain herself or her grief. After a while, she began speaking in a quiet voice about small things, not about herself directly, but about the storm, the birds she had seen on the way, and the horses outside. She spoke with a softness that invited listening without demanding it. The cowboy nodded and responded with small observations of his own about the ranch, the clouds, and how the rain changed the smell of the earth. The conversation gradually moved to personal memories. Without force, she mentioned a place she used to walk in the mornings with someone she loved. He listened quietly without pressing for details. He shared a story of his own loss, not as advice or pity, but as a small reflection that showed empathy. He talked about mornings when he felt alone but had to keep going for the animals, and the land she listened with careful attention. The stories were brief and simple, but they created a bridge. She realized that she was not alone in carrying grief. Even if her experiences were unique, the cowboy's quiet honesty gave her permission to speak without fear of judgment or interruption. She began to feel the relief that came from simply sharing space with someone who understood the storm outside. Continued, but they were unaware of it. For long stretches, they spoke in pauses, noticing the rhythm of each other's breathing and the small gestures that accompanied words. She noticed how calm he remained and how he never rushed the conversation or tried to solve anything. She felt a sense of safety she had not experienced in a long time. At one point, she shared a small story about her favorite coffee cup and how she would always drink from it with someone else. She laughed softly, and he smiled, not at the story itself, but at the comfort in seeing her smile for the first time. He did not comment on her grief directly, but his presence acknowledged it and allowed it to exist without disruption. The storm softened, and the light shifted. Outside, the windows reflected the change and created a peaceful atmosphere. They continued talking about small things, memories, and quiet observations of life around them. They did not need to fill every moment with words. Silence now carried meaning. They could feel understood without being required to reveal everything. She realized she was enjoying the company without needing it. She felt a connection forming not through declarations or confessions, but through shared quietness and gentle listening. She understood that this was a rare kind of human interaction, one that did not demand performance or explanation but only presence. Cowboy noticed small changes in her posture, her breathing, and her gaze. He understood that trust was being built. Slowly, not through grand gestures, but through patience and awareness. He offered subtle acknowledgement through nods, soft smiles, and careful listening. He did not intrude. He remained grounded and reliable in a way that allowed her to feel secure. They continued to share stories, small observations, and reflections for hours. The diner remained largely empty, allowing them to exist in their own quiet bubble. The rain stopped and sunlight began filtering through the clouds. They noticed the change, together pointing out details in the landscape, the colors in the sky, and the movement of the wind through the trees. Spoke more openly about moments from her past, not in great detail, but enough to allow him to understand her without needing answers or advice. He responded in kind, sharing small truths about his life that reflected both loss and resilience. Their conversation became a delicate balance of speaking and listening with care and attentiveness. At some point, she looked at him and realized she felt lighter. Her shoulders were less tense, and the ache in her chest had eased slightly. She did not know why exactly, but the combination of presence, understanding, and quiet. That conversation had shifted something inside her. She felt gratitude not just for the storm passing, but for the shared moment of humanity that had unfolded. The cowboy noticed the shift in her demeanor too. He felt a small sense of satisfaction in knowing that offering his presence and listening without demand had created a meaningful impact. He did not need recognition or thanks. The experience itself was enough to reinforce his belief in the power of gentle human connection. They continued speaking until the diner began to fill with other people. She did not want to leave yet. She felt the pull of routine outside. She thanked him quietly for the company, not because he had done anything extraordinary, but because he had been there. Without judgment, she acknowledged the space that had allowed her to open up safely and gently. He nodded in return and gave a soft smile. She walked out into the clearing sky, feeling a small but profound sense of comfort. The storm had passed, the air was fresher, and the world felt less heavy. She understood that small gestures of attention and listening could have lasting impact on someone carrying grief. That day, she returned to her temporary lodging, feeling lighter in her chest. She reflected on the simple conversation and the way someone had allowed her to exist without pressure. He had shown that human connection did not need drama or performance. It could be small, patient, and steady, and still leave an unforgettable mark. The cowboy returned to the ranch as the evening approached. Thinking of her quietly, he felt a sense of anticipation, not for romance or adventure, but for the continuation of a simple, connection that respected the space and grief of another person. He knew that patience and gentle presence could be as meaningful as any grand action. In the following days, they met again in similar circumstances. They spoke in pauses and reflections about life memories and the world around them. They were learning to understand each other slowly through unspoken empathy and careful listening. A connection that began in silence was deepening in ways that neither could fully define, yet both could feel the day began. With a calm light filtering through the clouds, she walked slowly toward the diner, knowing that she would find the same quiet space there. She did not hurry. She wanted to feel the moment fully as she had the day before. The air carried a gentle warmth, and the faint smell of rain from the night before. He was already outside tending to the small chores around the ranch. She noticed him immediately, but did not feel the need to approach. She knew he would be aware if she needed anything. He had a presence that was steady, quiet, and patient. She felt a small reassurance simply knowing he was nearby without pressure. As she entered the diner, she realized that this would be different from previous visits. The atmosphere seemed charged with the possibility of small, unexpected events. She did not know what might happen, but she could sense that the ordinary morning might turn into something memorable without warning. The cowboy noticed her and nodded gently. She returned the gesture, feeling the warmth of recognition without words. They did not speak immediately. They sat at the same table as before, allowing the shared silence to exist. Naturally, the morning passed slowly with soft exchanges about the weather, the movement of animals outside, and small details of the land around Thema. A sudden message came from the diner owner that a delivery truck could not get through because of a small washout on the road. She was supposed to leave shortly, but the storm had blocked the path. The cowboy offered to show her a nearby trail through the ranch that was safe. He did not insist. He only offered the option and allowed her to choose. They walked together toward the ranch. The land stretched wide and open before them. She noticed how the light shifted on the hills, the colors of the grass, and the movement of the horses. In the distance, the world felt larger and slower. She realized she had been trapped in the confines of her own grief for so long that she had forgotten how to see the subtle beauty around her. The cowboy spoke in calm, measured tones about the land, the seasons, the animals, and how the rhythm of life there helped him carry his own burdens. She listened quietly, absorbing the simplicity and care in his words. There was no pressure, no expectation, only shared awareness. That made her feel lighter. They arrived at a small clearing where the horses grazed. He showed her a spot where he often came to reflect and remember someone he had lost long ago. She felt a wave of understanding and comfort in the shared space. The act was simple, yet profound. She did not need to speak about her pain to feel acknowledged. Sitting together quietly, she felt the weight of her grief ease slightly. It was not gone, but it no longer pressed on her chest. She noticed the warmth of the sun on her skin, the sound of the horses moving slowly, and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The moment felt suspended in time, allowing her to breathe and simply exist. He offered her a small gesture that mattered more than words. He shared a piece of cloth to sit on, showing attention to her comfort. She smiled softly at the thoughtfulness and the care that required no explanation. She realized that kindness did not always need grand actions. Sometimes the smallest gestures carried the deepest impact. They talked intermittently about memories, not of loss, but of moments that had made them feel alive. The cowboy mentioned mornings when he watched the sunrise and how it reminded him to keep going. She spoke of quiet walks and the simple joys she had once cherished. This exchange built a delicate bond rooted in understanding and respect. The sun climbed higher and the air grew warmer. She noticed how her chest felt lighter, how her mind felt calmer. She realized that a stranger had provided her a moment that felt like a gift, the gift of feeling seen without words of sympathy or pity. Just the presence of someone who understood without demanding anything in return. They stayed until the sun began to shift, signaling the late afternoon. He guided her back to the edge of the ranch where the trail met the main road, she felt a small reluctance to leave the clearing it had become a sanctuary in a few short hours, and she knew it would stay with Herbie for parting. She turned and looked at him. Her eyes conveyed gratitude, not for a heroism, but for the quiet human care he had offered. She felt safe without being told she was safe. She felt understood without having to explain. She felt peace. Without needing to fight for it, he nodded in acknowledgement, and they walked a few steps in silence. Before she turned toward the Rodan, the way back, she noticed colors she had missed before in the sky, the pattern of clouds, and the way the wind moved through the trees. She felt her heart open to the possibility that life could contain moments of calm joy even after grief. She understood that this was a turning point in her journey, though it had come in the form of something simple. He watched from a distance as she left the ranch, feeling a quiet satisfaction. He knew that offering his presence with care, patience, and attention had created a meaningful impact. She had left lighter in her spirit, and he had witnessed it without demanding explanation or recognition. The moment lingered in both of their minds. The clearing, the sun, the horses, and the quiet conversation became a shared memory even without words. It was a moment that transformed a normal morning into an experience neither of them would forget. As the evening approached, she reflected on the day she realized that grief could exist alongside new moments of calm, and understanding that the world could still offer beauty and that human connection could arrive gently without forcing emotions. She felt grateful for the presence of someone who had understood without asking for anything in return. The cowboy returned to his routine on the ranch, carrying the quiet memory of her presence. He knew that the bond formed in silence and shared attention could be lasting and profound. Even small acts of care could create unforgettable moments if offered with patience and authenticity. That evening, the widow sat quietly at her lodging, thinking about the day. She felt a soft glow in her chest and a sense of hope she had not known for a long time. She understood that the turning point had arrived not through grand gestures, but through simple, shared humanity and attention. She carried the experience with her, knowing it would guide her in the days ahead. The morning after the unforgettable day on the ranch, she woke slowly with a sense of calm she had not known for weeks. She did not rush. She allowed herself to sit quietly by the window, with the soft light touching her face and the smell of coffee filling the room. The house she stayed in was modest, but it felt welcoming, and she appreciated the stillness. She remembered the clearing, the horses, the warmth of the sun, and the quiet conversation. She realized how much lighter she felt inside. She could still feel the ache of loss, but it no longer seemed overwhelming. It was part of her, but not all of her, and that made a difference she had not felt in a long time. After breakfast, she decided to take a slow walk through the town. She wanted to feel the streets, the air, and the rhythm of life without pressure. She noticed the way the wind moved through the trees, the laughter of children playing, and the soft steps of people going about their day. She felt connected to the world around her in a small but meaningful way. The cowboy appeared nearby, tending to a fence. She noticed him, and he nodded in greeting. She smiled softly back, feeling a sense of recognition that needed no words. He did not approach her directly, but his presence was reassuring in the same quiet way it had been before they existed in the same space, without needing to fill it with conversation. She continued walking and passed the diner, where she had spent so many quiet mornings. The memories of the conversations shared and the moments of understanding came back to her. She realized how much those simple experiences had helped her regain a sense of peace and perspective. She felt gratitude for the ordinary acts that had become extraordinary through attention and care. She stopped by a small park and sat on a bench watching the light play on the leaves. She thought about how she had arrived feeling burdened and alone, and how she now felt a small sense of hope. She understood that grief was not something to rush or escape from, but something that could coexist with moments of comfort and joy. The cowboy continued his work nearby. He did not intrude on her space. He observed quietly and gave small gestures of acknowledgement when necessary. She noticed and felt the subtle reassurance in knowing someone cared. Without needing recognition or reward, it was a rare and gentle kind of support that made her feel human again. As the day passed, she walked slowly along the edge of town, noticing details she had missed before. The rhythm of life in the town felt soothing, the way people moved, how the sun reflected off windows, and the faint hum of activity all reminded her that the world continued and there was space for her to continue with it. She felt the presence of life without being overwhelmed by it. She reflected on the moments spent on the ranch, the clearing, the sunlight, the horses grazing, and the quiet conversation with the cowboy. These moments were simple but profound. They had shifted her perspective and allowed her to feel seen and understood without pressure. She realized that true kindness often comes quietly and without demand. She turned to the diner for a final cup of coffee before leaving town. The cowboy was there, tending to small chores around the entrance. She did not speak, but their eyes met, and she felt the deep recognition of shared understanding. She did not need to say goodbye. She felt the connection in silence, and that was enough. As she drove away from the town, the memories stayed with her. The landscape, the wind, the light, and the quiet moments of connection were now part of her. She felt gratitude for the experience, for the presence of someone who had noticed her and offered care without words, and for the small but meaningful moments that had allowed her heart to feel lighter. She thought about her life at home, the memories she carried, and the grief that was still present. She realized that the journey ahead would still have challenges, but she could face them with a renewed sense of strength and calm. She carried with her the understanding that moments of human connection could arrive gently and transform the ordinary into something unforgettable. The cowboy continued his work on the ranch, feeling a quiet satisfaction. He knew that the moments shared had left a lasting impact. He did not need thanks or recognition. He only carried the memory of her presence and the understanding that small gestures and careful attention could change someone's day or even their perspective on life. She arrived home and unpacked slowly. Her movements were calm and deliberate. She placed the memories of the trip carefully in her mind, as though storing treasures. She reflected on the lessons learned from the quiet moments, the patient presence, and the shared humanity. She felt a sense of peace she had not known for a long time. Evenings were now different for her. She could sit quietly with a cup of tea and remember the sun on the ranch, the movement of horses, and the gentle presence of someone who had understood without words. She felt comforted by the memory and inspired by the experience to allow herself moments of calm and reflection. Days passed, and she returned to her routines, but she carried with her a subtle change, a lightness in her step, a calmness in her heart, and a quiet hope that life could offer moments of understanding even in the midst of loss. She remembered that connection could be offered simply by being present and attentive. Without expectation or demand, the cowboy watched the horizon on the ranch, each evening reflecting on the small but profound moments shared. He felt a quiet contentment, knowing that his awareness and presence had made a difference in someone's life. He did not seek recognition but felt satisfaction in the gentle impact of human connection. The story of that quiet morning and the moments that followed became a part of both their lives. Though unspoken and simple, it remained unforgettable. It was a reminder that grief could coexist with moments of peace, that human kindness could arrive gently, and that ordinary days could hold extraordinary experiences when met with attention, care, and presence. She continued her life carrying the memory of the ranch, the sunlight, the horses, and the quiet connection. She understood that the world could offer comfort and understanding even when it felt overwhelming, that she could find moments of peace amidst grief, and that small gestures of human care could leave lasting impressions in the quiet of her own home. She reflected on the journey. She smiled softly, knowing that she had been changed by simple acts of presence and understanding, that life could still offer beauty and human connection even in the midst of sorrow, that she had found peace not through grand events, but through patience, attention, and care. And in the wide open space of the ranch, the cowboy continued his work, carrying the same memory with him. Understanding that the quiet presence he had offered had created an unforgettable impact, that the simplest gestures of human kindness could transform hearts, and that sometimes the greatest gift was simply being there for someone who needed to be seen and understood. The days after her return home were quiet but filled with a new awareness. She woke each morning with a sense of calm that had not existed before. She noticed the sunlight falling across the walls, the sound of birds outside, and the gentle rhythm of life continuing around her. She no longer felt the need to rush or fill every moment with action or thought. She began taking slow walks in her neighborhood, observing the small details she had once overlooked. The flowers along the sidewalks, the way shadows shifted during the day, and the sound of children laughing in a nearby park reminded her that life continued even after loss. Each step she took felt deliberate and grounded, as if she were learning to inhabit her own presence once again. The memory of the cowboy and the quiet mornings at the diner and the clearing on the ranch remained with her. She thought about how simple human presence had given her permission to feel safe and to process her grief. Without pressure, she realized that kindness could be quiet and subtle, yet powerful enough to shift the way someone experienced the world. She started writing small notes to herself about things that brought her comfort in moments she wanted to remember. The sound of rain, the warmth of sunlight, the calm feelings she had while walking near the horses in the open fields. She did not write these notes for anyone else but for herself, to anchor the calm she felt inside. On one of her walks, she noticed a stranger struggling with bags of groceries. He dropped one and began to look frustrated. She instinctively went to help, offering a hand to pick up the items. The stranger looked surprised but grateful. She felt a warmth inside, knowing she had offered care without expectation. It reminded her of the cowboy who had offered his presence so quietly and thoughtfully. Days turned into weeks, and she began to notice changes in how she approached the world. She smiled more freely to people she passed. She paused to listen to the wind through the trees, and she allowed herself to sit quietly without feeling guilty about it. The grief she carried remained, but it had shifted into something lighter that she could bear with grace. She returned occasionally to the small diner in town. She ordered coffee and took a seat by the window, remembering the first quiet mornings she had spent there. She thought about the conversations with the cowboy and the way simple presence had been more meaningful than any words. She felt gratitude for the experience that had shown her the power of human care. The cowboy continued his work on the ranch as well. He observed life with a careful awareness and a sense of patience that shaped his interactions. He thought about the moments shared and the subtle changes he had seen in her demeanor. He understood that true connection often happened in small steps, without demand or urgency. She began to notice the little joys in everyday life. The way sunlight touched the leaves, the smell of earth after rain, the laughter of children, and the sound of bird song. Each of these details became a reminder that the world was not only filled with loss, but also with opportunities for quiet happiness. She felt gratitude for the ability to notice and appreciate these moments. Occasionally, she would return to the trail on the ranch, where she had felt the sunlight and watched the horses. She walked slowly along the path and allowed herself to remember without sadness. She reflected on how a single act of human awareness could create a lasting memory and a sense of inner peace. She felt inspired to offer similar moments to others whenever possible. Cowboy noticed her presence when she returned, but he did not intrude. He understood the importance of allowing her to move freely without expectation. He offered a nod or a small smile, acknowledging her quietly. The bond between them remained subtle, yet meaningful, formed through shared understanding and patience. She found herself reflecting on the journey of her grief and recovery. She realized that her life had shifted from a place of heaviness to a space of gentle awareness. She understood that grief was not something to be erased, but something that could coexist with moments of peace, joy, and quiet connection. She began to cultivate small routines that nurtured her spirit. She made time to walk slowly each morning, to write in her journal, to notice the world around her, and to offer kindness to those who needed it. She felt empowered by the understanding that these small gestures created meaning not only for others but also for herself. Days continued to unfold with the rhythm of simple awareness and quiet presence. She found herself smiling at small things, the way she had once smiled freely With someone she had loved deeply, she realized that even in the absence of that presence, she could cultivate calm joy and gratitude in her own life. The cowboy continued tending to the land, observing the subtle changes of the seasons in the world around him. He remained patient with the rhythms of life and understood that his quiet presence had the potential to impact others in ways he might never fully know. He carried the memory of the shared mornings with a sense of calm satisfaction. Began to notice that her heart felt lighter and her mind more present. She no longer feared the silence. She embraced it as a space for reflection and peace. She realized that life could offer moments of connection, care, and understanding, even when it felt overwhelming or filled with grief. The connection they had formed remained gentle and unspoken, but it influenced the way she moved through the world. She carried the lessons of patience, presence, and quiet human care into her daily life. She found meaning in offering small gestures of attention and empathy to those around her, and in noticing the beauty of ordinary moments. As the seasons changed, she felt a steady growth in her heart. She walked in the sunlight, felt the wind through her hair, and listened to the sounds of the world. She allowed herself to feel joy without guilt, and to honor her grief without letting it define every moment. Her life felt richer and more grounded. She reflected on the journey from the first morning she had arrived at the diner to the calm presence she now carried within herself. She understood that healing did not come through rushing or force, but through small steps, shared moments, and the gentle awareness of others she felt gratitude for. The cowboy who had offered presence, and for her own willingness to accept it. The world continued around her, filled with ordinary beauty and quiet opportunities for connection. She walked slowly and observed attentively. She allowed herself to feel the subtle joys and to notice the impact of small gestures in both giving and receiving care. She felt a sense of continuity and growth that was steady, and sustaining. Evenings became a time for reflection. She sat quietly with a cup of tea and thought about the moments that had shifted her perspective. She remembered the sun on the ranch, the movement of horses, the quiet conversations, and the gentle gestures. She felt comforted by the memory and inspired to continue cultivating awareness, patience, and care in her own life. Her journey continued in this way, gradually and gently. She carried forward the understanding that grief and peace could coexist, that human connection could arrive subtly, and that small acts of kindness had lasting power. She felt confident in her ability to navigate life with calm presence and attention to the world around her. The cowboy watched the horizon and thought about the seasons and the small impact presence could have. He understood that life unfolded slowly and meaningfully through simple acts. He remained attentive to the rhythm of the land and the people who entered it. He carried with him the quiet knowledge that patience and observation could change hearts in profound ways. She continued to live her life with a renewed awareness each day. She noticed the ordinary beauty around her and the subtle ways human care could be offered and received. She felt empowered by the small moments of attention, connection, and empathy that filled her days with meaning and joy. The story of the quiet mornings, the shared conversations, and the presence of someone who understood without words remained a guiding memory. She moved forward, carrying the lessons learned and the gentle hope that life could continue to offer moments of peace, understanding, and connection, even amidst the ongoing experience of loss.